All right, hey folks, welcome to night school. So we are the Political Education Committee of the North Brooklyn branch of the New York City chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America. Night school occurs every other week on Tuesdays, where we discuss readings and share knowledge on socialist theory, from like the classic history stuff we need to know to our current situations and analyzing those. So political education is incredibly important, as we all know, because we are all here. As socialists, we want to not only hold and fight for our beliefs, but also be able to deeply understand why our beliefs and analyses are correct and be able to communicate that to others. The typical ideology is that politics is something that is done by politicians or happens during election cycles. But as socialists, we know that politics is happening all around us, all the time, everywhere. So the more in tune we are to analyzing the world around us and recognizing our current conditions and communicating it to others, the stronger that we are and the larger that our movement is. So I hope tonight everyone can grab some takeaways from our discussion and be able to have conversations with, other people in our lives that might not be here tonight, so that we can share and grow the knowledge. Tonight, we are having a really important session on the interaction and intersection of race and class, led by NBK-DSA's very own Cheryl Rivera. Cheryl is a member of the Central Brooklyn branch. She's currently working on the Defund NYPD campaign and is on the National Abolition Working Group Steering Committee. Previously, she's worked on the citywide mutual aid fund and was on the Socialist Feminist Working Group OC. She's also an editor at Lux Magazine, which is a new socialist feminist publication, and I'm told that she likes cows a lot. Awesome. So Cheryl, take it away.
Sorry, guys. I'm getting feedback that it's still a little distant, so just do your best to project if you
Wait,
can.
project?
Yes.
Is this good? Do you guys like that? I don't know, some people, maybe that's better. Hi, I'm Cheryl. I don't know many people here, which is a little nerve-wracking because now it feels like a little bit like public speaking and, a little less like I'm just talking to my comrades, but we're all comrades here, right?
Yes.
Exactly, we're all friends, thank you. So I'm just gonna preface this by saying I feel like I'm about to give you an analysis that I've been working through. But of course, this is not like, I don't want to present this like, and this is the absolute only way to think of this. And I'm hoping that the discussion we can have afterwards, it's sort of like, maybe we can challenge. I don't know, things like that. I also have some open questions at the end. I'm sure there's actually some other questions. And I'll admit that I could not get to a couple of these things. So there might be things in there that would be interesting to interpose against the things that I'm gonna say. Cool. Also, I wrote these kind of notes, and if you can see what this looks like, maybe you'll forgive me if what it sounds like is also a little jumbled. It will be like this paper. But I've got a little outline. Okay, so I kind of want to start with talking about class and race. I want to start with this idea that like people say a lot, right? Black liberation is liberation for all. And I want to like unpack that a little bit. Not because I disagree with it. I agree with this notion, but I do think it's worthwhile to not let this just be like a platitude that we say, but to actually like understand like, let's think about why this is really actually true. So I think when we're saying Black liberation is liberation for all, we're acknowledging that there's like this specific oppression of Black people, right? And that this specific oppression is foundational. And when we say liberation for all, is this foundational to like whatever oppressive order that we're currently under, because we're all socialists, that oppressive order is capitalism, right? That we're all on. So if it's true that Black liberation is liberation for all, that means that this Black oppression is at the cornerstone of capitalism. And I am joined in this belief by people who are way smarter than me, like Robin D.G. Kelly and Cedric Robinson, who I'm going to steal a lot of their thought and then regurgitate it back to you. So if you didn't watch those YouTube videos, that's okay, because I watched the YouTube video and I'm going to tell you basically exactly what they said in the YouTube video. And if you didn't watch it, you're like, she's maybe really smart, but you should watch it from the like actual source, like, because it sounds smarter from them. So I guess I want to like go back a little bit to the formation of like capitalism, and probably you've all heard the term like racial capitalism. And for a while, I thought that this meant there was like a specific type of capitalism that was like racial. And instead I have come to understand that all types of capitalism are racial, that racial capitalism isn't like a subset of like capitalism, but we're just talking about capitalism altogether. Are they not hearing?
Yeah, they're asking to just get a little closer, so we're like, sorry to interrupt.
Okay, I'll just be this close. Hopefully y'all can hear it. I don't know what to do. Strain your ears. Turn the volume up. So, where is it? Okay, so capitalism out of formation. In like Cedric Robinson's conception of this, which I also agree with, you have race sort of coming up before you have this like formation of like capitalism for real. So out of Europe, you're getting this like racialism that already exists in Europe. Slavs are not quite the right type of people. I mean, like they're all like white now to us, but at the moment there's all these like people, and it's probably before this there's like Christian notions. Who's really pure ideology? Like who's the chosen people? Who is given God's dominion over like this land? Blah blah blah. And so you got to figure out who's part of this in-group, who's not part of this in-group. Part of the out-group, you start racializing different European peoples. That's what Europeans are doing to each other. The Slavs, not white, are racialized people. The Scots are racialized people. Irish, all these like different types of people who are like being racialized by each other in Europe to like develop this like racialism disorder, which then is we got out of this like colonialism that first happens within, Cedric Robinson says, like first within Europe, colonizing each other, and then starts to expand outwards. Incredibly greedy people, just like can't get enough of colonialism. Let's go somewhere else and colonize other places. And when we come to the New World, this sort of racial hierarchy that I think we're very familiar with starts to come into play. And you go to the New World, and the savages there, it's like the savages in Europe should be dominated. Murder, because you need their land. So you gotta take that shit from them. So those are savage people, and they are basically put into what, not for real, but extinction, in the conception of this European mind. And then you need someone to do the labor though still. So you've got all this like forced labor of like these racialized like minorities, these what are today white people also are in forced labor, but you also get these like black people who are now get to be the slave class. And from there, this like development of the current like racial order we have, it comes out of that as we're building the new world. This really means, I think the important thing to take away from this is that race and class were always bound up to each other, like from the very like beginning. And so I think like race is class. It's really not kind of a separate thing. Something that Robin D.G. Kelly said is like, race is a modality through which class is lived, and I would say also like maintained. So I feel like that's also just saying, that's a fancy way of saying race is class. But something he also like made a point of saying was that race is not incidental It's not just like happens to be under capitalism, but it is constitutive. Hope I said this word right. So like it is inherent part of this capitalist system. It is what has helped build this class hierarchy, this capitalist hierarchy that we have. And another point that he makes, I think is important to bring up, is that racism is now this thing that capitalism survives off of. So capitalism needs racism to survive. Specifically, what capitalism needs is that it's created this order. Who is allowed to get the stuff is important to determine, right? When you've got a system where you're trying to extract the value out of the land, you need to extract that value through the labor of people. Okay, you need to know who's going on the receiving end of getting the shit and who's on the other end of like your shit's getting taken and your labor's getting like taken to make the shit. That is really what white and black, because those are really, at the top is white and our current height, and it's at the bottom. Those are really like, that's what the spectrum's about. White, you're getting the shit. Black, you're the person like we're extracting the labor out of, and there's like spectrums or whatever. But essentially, that is what race is like determined. And so this like thing that capitalism needs is that, because the reality is actually that not all white people are getting the shit. The reality is that there are like specific groups, not only like just white people, but the specific groups of white people who are going to get this shit. However, you can't, that specific group is not big enough, right? So we also need capitalism to say like, constitute this class of white people, make it bigger than just this like small class, so that these white people, their class loyalty is to whiteness, not to whatever other classes we might constitute, which could be the working class or blah, blah. So instead, let's constitute a class of whiteness so that you can feel loyalty to that, pledge allegiance to that. So whiteness is a class identity. I think blackness is a class identity. These are all just like class identities as well. Where am I going after this? Cool, so that was like brief, not like sort of historical thing of like racial capitalism. And now I'm gonna get into what I feel are maybe the more controversial parts of what I'm gonna say. I'd love to hear your pushback on this. Just things I'm thinking through. So I've been thinking a lot about how obviously there's not like a static conception of like race in the US. Things have changed. Like one drop rule, we're moving out there, like we used to have a sort of racial hierarchy, you could just be like a little bit black, like 1/6 and then you're black. Adonis is like Drake's child, sorry, I'm just saying Adonis, like people just fucking know who Adonis is, like Drake's son, who was blonde, definitely black, like 100 years ago. Nowadays, it's like, is he? We don't know. Question mark. It's not like a static thing, these categories, it's like race. And also you have all of these groups, these white people that we talked about, who used to be like very racialized, who are now white people. They're white. Irish became white. Good for them. Whatever, you gotta do a lot of shady shit to become white, like as a racial group, but there's benefits. So, the categories change, they expand. They're a little flexible, but what's unflexible is this category of like black/underclass. Like you need one of those. Some people have to stay in there. And I think actually what's happening is that there are more people who are being routed into this underclass as capital ever, needs to grow, just like a never-ending fucking gaping maw. It needs like more and more and more. You gotta like extract more and more stuff. And like it's getting thin out there. You gotta squeeze more people become disposable, etc. So I think though something that I've been thinking about has been how race, at least or the feelings of racialized classes are, keep using this word and I hope I'm using it right. I say mediated, which means something funneled, funneled through what I think of as like these civilizing like institutions, or before maybe first like disciplining institutions, things that like structure this like racial class. So you got this labor that's structured through obviously like first like slavery, it's structured through Black codes, it's structured through Jim Crow. All of these things are ways to structure not only the social life of like Black people, but also the like labor of Black people. If you have like Black codes, you can't lawyer, you can't, you then can pick someone up and put them in the chain gang. That was what they did all the time, press you into like some essentially indentured servitude, slavery, all of that. So all of these were like these institutions that exist to control, to deal with the fact that you can't just have like a racialized class of people. You can't also have like just any underclass. And you're like, they'll just take it. That's never ever been true. Even in the times of like having, the slavery is fully like intact. You still needed not only just like the institution of slavery, but you also needed a lot of slave catchers. You need to do a lot of whipping, you need to do a lot of lynching, just constantly doing this because you got to really like beat down this class consciousness that's arising of this oppressed class. You got to keep doing that. But you also have these like institutions, slavery as an institution, Black codes, Jim Crow, and now the prison industrial complex, I think, also is one of these like institutions, these disciplining like institutions. But I think that discipline, well, first also I want to say, I think those are like sticks for the underclass, for like Black people and other non-Black people who are not white as well sometimes. But you also have increasingly now that we've reached civil rights happened, yay. And then it's like legally, you're a full citizen. So we need other ways other than sometimes the more direct ways of being able to say codified, like you can't exist while Black. We need other ways to deal with what will inevitably be these resistances. I do think, controversial, but I do think it's true that there also are institutions like NGOs and academia that provide a sort of repository of like Black, other people of color, like anger, like things that you want to change the world, you want to do something, this energy then sucked up into these like things. That's also a disciplining like institution. I see like it takes that energy and it's like, we're gonna do useless things with it. We're not gonna do anything with it at all. We're gonna feel maybe like you could do something, but you're not gonna actually do something. And then, as I said, you have this like prison and you have the police, which exists, I think, especially for the class, the underclass that one is not useful anymore, like their surplus labor. It also, I think, exists for those who will not obey, who are dangerous, who are like potentially dangerous energy. Those people can also be disappeared into the prisons by the police, which is why I'm an abolitionist. But importantly, not only do these institutions exist, like prison and police exist to discipline this like specific class, like Black people, people of color, the underclass, but also I think to discipline also in a way white people, people who potentially could become race traders. Hopefully you're all race traders, like those people, because remember these categories are flexible. They're not totally set. Some of you became white, you can be unwhited and potentially, or treat it that way, put it in this category of like, by these institutions. You see this preoccupation, like conservative minds, they're always like very like preoccupied with like, if these Blacks get in power, they're gonna treat us just like we treated them. That is the psyche there, like that I could become of this underclass. I could become of that and experience those punishments both on a societal level, because they all know what it is societally, and then quite literally, there's also or quite, visceral, because it's literal also societal level, but like this prison, this police, that act, like violate the baton. And then there's like little social justice violence, like when people are just, you're not a person on a daily basis. So those like, that's helping keep the broader white class in line as well. I don't want to be a Negro. I can see what that's about. No, that's not me. And keeps also the black class in line as well. Which then brings me to why I'm an abolitionist. Part of this is because I really do think that this class, which is racialized people, especially Black people, exists as this lumpen proletariat in some ways. I say that because Black people are workers, yes, many of us are of the working class, but are, I think the relation for many Black people, especially as like they become, like the welfare queen trope. These are like people who are no longer useful to capital necessarily. And I think there's a lot of that largely conceptually like Black people fall into like what will feel like a lumpen proletariat versus like a proletariat, like the hard working, white worker is a conception. It's a really racist one that obviously conservatives like to put forward. But I don't think it's untrue about the role that Black people have played historically also in the US. Like the slave is a worker, but not a worker in the same, it's also, a slave is also a property, and Black people did not have full rights as citizens. We're not full people until after civil rights legislation was passed. This is like, to be in a, like this property relation is, I think, removes you from the just straight white proletariat category. Instead, you're just like underclass lumpen proletariat. So I'm an abolitionist because I don't believe prisons and police keep us safe, because I believe that one of their purposes also will always be to discipline any sort of action that tries to break the status quo, capitalism. So I think you can't want to like destroy capitalism and not want to destroy the cops, because they're going to destroy your ass before you ever get to destroying capitalism if you don't do that. But also I think there's a lot of revolutionary energy in the people that the prison industrial complex like targets. A lot of potential, a lot of, people who are experiencing the full brunt of like the violence of the state, who are, have been left to essentially rot. There's no care by the state. They are potentially, they're not getting the veil, which I do feel many of us get the veil of the society, right? You have a certain sort of class of people, they might be struggling, but there's also not struggling, striving. Many of them are striving to be in the upper middle class, Those are the people who go to NGOs, who also may be Black people who are like, I am fired up, I'm head up, I'm ready to end racism. I will join an NGO and I'll do nothing. That's what it's gonna be. But I do think if you belong to this class that's like particularly targeted by the prison industrial complex, which are largely like Black people, Indigenous people, Latinos, like you are part of this class that just gets to see straight up like the fucking stick. You're not seeing any of that. What's the other thing? Carrot. I was like, what is, why a carrot? No one likes carrots like that. But like, the carrot, you're not seeing the carrot, you're seeing the fucking stick. One. Two, these people are already mostly not in line with whiteness as an identity. Because remember, go back, whiteness is a class identity. And there are people who are invested, white people, in this class identity. And therefore being invested in a class identity and whiteness, like that prevents you from being able to actually accomplish like any sort of like socialist revolution, socialist, future, because that whiteness is inherent to keeping capitalism as part of its foundation. It's just part of it. So for many reasons, I think that organizing like in the abolitionist realm puts you in contact with people who I think are well positioned to become socialists if they aren't already socialists, have a lot of incentive, the material interest is there. Not saying that white people couldn't have this, but I do find the major question I'd like to leave people with is just, how do we get white people to divest from the whiteness? Because that is a class relation. It is not optional to not like divest from whiteness if you would like to end capitalism, considering that racialism, racist, is inherent in the formation of this nation, this capitalist nation. Or at least that's what me, Robin D.G. Kelly, and Cedric Robinson believe. I don't know, like, y'all can be against us if you want. I'm just saying they're really smart, so maybe you should consider it. I'm gonna wrap up because I feel like I've been talking a long time and sorry to please follow. Okay, some question that I have, in addition to like wanting to think critically, I think we should think critically about what are the organizing strategies that we use currently, the things that we as an org do, like how are they helping us like contest whiteness? Like how are they helping us contest that and contest like figuring out that divestment from it? Are we doing that in our organizing, in the way that we're approaching our organizing projects? And I also like to ask, like, clearly some people of color, Black people, are, I say people of color actually, I'm gonna come out as a person who hates people of color. It's usually bad. Like, it doesn't really have like a good, you shouldn't use it unless you really, really mean all people of color. Otherwise, you should just say who you mean. And every time I've said people of color, I've mostly just meant Black people. Sorry, I've been cowardly. Black people, some Black people are like undergoing this sort of like whitening process, similar to like what the Irish did or whatever. You have to be like, you're one drop of Blackness, and if you want to like pass, like if you could pass, then you had to divest from like your entire Black family. Like you just never talk to them again. Like that was it. That was it. Now you have this like weird situation. Increasingly, you see like, there's someone, and they're white, and they're like, I'm a person of color. My great grandmother is Black, and there can be a leveraging of this. What I'm saying is identity politics, although I'm pro-identity politics in the original conception of it. What I'm against is that we're now seeing a cynical leveraging of identity, even Blackness, because now we have this whole, also post-civil rights, this new class of like Black capitalists, people who made it middle class, who are able to just do the work of also the oppressors, by being like, you see, if you strive, you can be like these people who are obviously deliberately a limited class that can only exist, to help the elites. But we're seeing this happening, this like, it's been a process, like as the racial hierarchy, the dynamic shifts, things will always have to shift because capital needs whiteness as a category, like as a class relation to sort of stand. And it will do a lot to prop that up. It'll like help, it'll bring in some people, if necessary, into the psychological category of whiteness. You're not all gonna get the riches or the whatever, but the psychological benefits. And there must be psychological benefits, remember, because white people are very invested in whiteness, in addition to material benefits. But how do we combat this, like what I consider like negative racial identity politics that capital deploys? Kamala Harris being like first Black president, I don't know, like she was first Black president for, or first Black woman president for like 8 minutes when Joe Biden was doing a colonoscopy. It was like, yay, that's fantastic. So how do we like combat that negative racial identity politics while at the same time that capitalism is using, while like attacking and still divesting from whiteness? Because that's kind of what I feel is a non-negotiable part of this. I'm gonna stop there. I hope y'all enjoyed that little rambly talk, and I hope we can have a fun discussion.
Cool. So usually before we like go into, I don't know if you want to do like a group Q&A or like do smaller groups, totally up to you, but just we usually go over community agreements first. If anyone on the committee wants to, Obi, we have you down for it, not to put you on the spot, but do you want to? Yeah.
Is that done with the microphone? And my voice. Hello? Okay.
Good.
Thank you for the talk. We're moving on to the Q&A portion. Everybody's here to learn. Please assume good intentions to be comradely. In person, raise your hand. In Zoom, type stack in the chat and we'll call on you. Please be free with your questions. Stack.
No, sorry, we just told people, so let me just repeat that in case Zoom people had trouble hearing. If anyone on Zoom has a question, just go ahead and type stack like I just did, and I can, maybe we can rotate between in-person people and Zoom people.
I can begin with the question. So the first question I want to know is, why isn't this race and class, the theory that you're putting forth, how come that's not widespread? How come people don't think about it much? The second question is kind of an obvious one, and I'm pretty sure someone's going to ask it, so I want to be first. I guess a lot of your theories or what you're saying will tend to contrast between what Adolf Reed would be saying, and I'm pretty sure you would be very familiar with what he thinks. I want to know what's your opinion on it, and how does what you're saying to what he's saying differ?
I love that you're so confident in me that I read it. I don't read because I didn't, not because I won't, but just there's a lot of shit. Yeah, my pocket's like 2,000 art. Y'all know that? Like how deep when you have to read a lot of books, suddenly like you're a socialist and everyone wants you to read stuff. I'm in that. So I'm not clear. So you're gonna have to summarize it a little. I know a little bit about Adolf Reed only just because people were mad as hell. And then beyond that, I don't know his arguments. Why is this theory that I'm saying not as widespread? Well, one, because Black Marxism is a very long book. That's probably why. I mean, it's very big. Why else? I think if we would say like, why don't people think about race and class and the intertwining of that and how, as I said, I think race is class. I think it's because obviously white people don't like to think about it. This is not like new surprising stuff like to many Black like socialists, like the things that will come up. But it does feel like a topic sometimes that's like on the side, and we're not in spaces that are mostly white. And I think that's for obvious reasons of sort of ego self-protection. I don't know, like white people, it's pretty hard to divest from whiteness. It's pretty hard to divest from the like racial hierarchy of capitalism entirely. It's psychologically, I think, I'm gonna say this, and I was like, oh no, I'm gonna scare all the white people. I'm gonna say psychologically damaging to be like, I would like to divest from like whiteness. So I don't think there's anything more to like, why is this not more talked about or just more discussed, or why don't we stay on it more often other than simple discomfort? It's not a comfortable thing. I mean, I was watching that show, Kill a Little Brute, is that what it's called? Yeah, it was an HBO, it's like a multi-part, like documentary type show about the history, like beginnings of America. Just bring that up. Exterminate all groups, yes. And so just bringing that up because I was watching it with a white friend, and we had like 2 episodes in, and I was like, I'll kill your ass. You know, like, I'm just saying, it takes a lot to go there in conversation. I mean, we're here, we're going there, but it takes a lot of trust and stuff in this way to like talk about this because it actually is, and it can be deeply upsetting to really unpack the structures of like the way race has played out in America. But Adolf, can you tell me more about like what this basic argument is?
Somebody else would probably be able to explain it better than I can, but he would probably say something like, don't even focus on the race of anyone, and just focus only on the class part, and that's it. What you're saying about whiteness and blackness would probably be irrelevant in this moment. Getting it wrong, but that's what I get from it.
That's what Adolf be thinking, like, I don't know, I guess, I just don't understand that, maybe because very clearly race structured the entire like labor force, aka the thing that everyone's like talking about, or laborers, the workers. That was the entire, that was all structured racially through the beginnings of the United States. I mean, even through, like, think about the union, the labor strugglers. Okay, we like unions. I like them too. I'm in the Transit Museum, and I'm reading shit, and I'm like, hold on. So what you're telling me, they didn't let any Black people in any of these unions that they were forming? Yes, race has structured everything, like everything in the United States, because it is a class structure. And so there's like not a working class, because we have race and class. There's like this working class, the struggle, this like desire. We're gonna make this like, you know, transportation, I forgot what it was, like the people who built like the tunnels, you know, we're gonna make this union. No Black people allowed in this union, which structures the people, the laborers. Like, how is this not relevant is what I asked Adolf Reed. Like, not only just from like slavery, which obviously that those people produced all of the stuff that made America possible, all of the, you know, the whole like stuff in the New World, like all of this. But also up until, I mean, now, today, recently, you know, you can have all sorts of fights you can say are structured also by race. So like class fights, labor fights, which I would say that would be something probably Adolf Reed, if he's like, I'm class only, you know, let's talk just about class. You're concerned about labor fights, right? They are mediated and like structured by race as well.
Cheryl, they're just asking that you repeat the question from other people because they
Okay.
can hear you the best.
Okay.
That's okay.
Yeah. My calling.
Should I get it?
Here, I'll just walk over.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for your talk. Yeah, so much to think about. So I have 2 questions. The first one is a little shorter. Is you talked about like the challenge of getting people to divest from whiteness, and my question is like, what are like things? What does it look like in practice? And then my second question is, since capitalism is like global, like how does the model where like white is on top and like Black is at the bottom sort of fit in countries where like the oppressor and the oppressed aren't necessarily fitting into that? Like, for example, like Japan colonizing Korea, it's like an Asian people colonizing other Asian people. Like how would that, like the racial aspect, I mean, obviously like they conceive of themselves as different races, but like not necessarily on a scale of like from Black to white. And like how does that like fit, that model fit a global context, I guess is my question.
Thanks. Ooh, I have such a bad, I was concentrating so hard on the second part of the question that I now forgot the first part of the question. Just remind me, what were the keywords?
The first question was like, how does divesting from whiteness
Oh,
look
what
like?
does it look like? Yeah. Okay, what does divesting from whiteness look like? You know, I think there's a great book that my comrade, I'm gonna tell you his name so you can just call him because he has all the readings. Ben Navy, just dropping these links to these texts to me, had about, it was old, it was like from the like 70s, from the 80s. It was and I was bringing it is a book of like experiences of people in like labor fights. So they're doing these labor fights, and it was talking about like the experience of like these workers who were fighting, as Black workers, white workers, so it's a mixed group, and what happened as it like sort of fell apart. And what happened is that the white people felt willing to compromise on the things that like these Black workers had wanted, you know? So there's these things of like, let's say the wages, the time, you know, time off and stuff like this. And then there's this stuff like, okay, I want to feel like I'm not being passed over as a Black person for like whatever position, so I can be like, you know, in these certain positions. I don't want to just be like the least well-paid position or something. And I think like really divesting from whiteness means to take all of those concerns like just as seriously as the other one, not to put these as like side ones, like side like demands, which has happened when you're organizing in multiracial coalitions. Divesting from whiteness, I think means, yeah, keeping those concerns of like Black people, other people, non-white people, as a like, not a nice to have, but like an essential thing. I think divesting from whiteness also, there's some personal, there's always personal shit, right? I really think you have to break the white lines of solidarity. White people have solidarity with each other. Shit is said, things happen. I mean, I wouldn't know, I'm not in those rooms, but I would have this friend who was really, like, she was Drake's child. She was a white person, but her father was Black. And she said she would go into these spaces and people would say wild shit to her. I was like, tell me the wild shit. I'm just interested. What does like whites only meetings look like? What do y'all be saying? What do y'all be eating? But you need to like disrupt. I do think in these interactions that white people have with each other can be a moment to like divest from whiteness and to orient yourself to a different sort of identity, to find like a way to relate to people that isn't kind of based in some sort of white solidarity, but that is like intentionally pushing back on that. Like make it uncomfortable. I don't know. say the thing. Be the person. Don't be the person who goes up to someone after a thing and be like, I really support you. I really, you know, a Black person or, you know, non-white person, you know, I really agree with what you said. Be the person who's like, I agree in the meeting, like, or I think so and so, like, was treated like shit. I don't know. You know, those are always divesting from whiteness. So, like, solidarity in the fights that we have, really take the concerns of non-white people seriously, and in your personal life, I think, yeah, constantly disrupt, constantly disrupt. As far as like the racial, like, things that exist in other countries, like what do we think of like, yeah, Japan, and what it's done, and I'm not an expert on the global race relations, so I'm an expert at being Black in America, but I don't know. I'm not gonna extend my you know, narrative of this hierarchy globally. I don't want to overextend in a way that is not, I don't know if it's real. I will say that I do know that like the United States and in particular has been able to like export its sort of its brand of capitalism, and it's therefore like the social relations that are like brought out of like, you know, in our society to other places. I think that's true. I find it very funny. I do find it genuinely funny. It has a very dark sense of humor. That no matter where I go in the world, I can guarantee they're going to be racist to me. Like, I don't know. There's very few places, like non-Black places, that I can go and I'm be like, it's not going to be racist as hell towards me. It definitely is. Like, it definitely is. Just anti-blackness is global. I don't know if there's like the same, white to black hierarchy everywhere. I do know anti-blackness is global, and that is a result of the US and its system. So
We have someone on stack from Zoom, if that's okay with people. We have iPhone. Sorry, I don't have your name, but please go ahead.
I apologize, it's Ashley. Yeah, to piggyback on that point, I'm curious what your thoughts are about the ways that leftists themselves invest in whiteness and class privilege within organizing spaces, because this is something that I think it comes up often. It's not a new thing, but DSA, for example, still largely white, still, at least in the meetings that I've gone to in my 4 or 5 years, still largely dominated by people who have some relative degree of class privilege, access to education, et cetera, still not really dominated by poor or Black people or any other group of color, or not even women. So I'm curious what you think leftists themselves should do to challenge themselves to break down whiteness and class privilege within the ways that we organize, because it doesn't seem to just be an issue outside of our spaces. It seems to be like actually embedded in a lot of the predominant leftist spaces like DSA. That's all.
yeah, I agree, because I don't think we're not outside of the system. So since we are all inside of it, I think it is a struggle for us to not replicate the same social relations and stuff that are just in general part of the United States. So I think there's I struggle with this because I also don't think that we are, I don't want to put this. I think we're not even yet really good at talking to each other. This is nice. We are talking to each other. But like, what I mean is I'm not seeing a ton of commitment from the majority of, like I would say, you have these people who are active in this org, and then there's a subset of them who are active in doing things like this, like going to a poly-ed night, talking with each other. But not all the active people are active in this way, which I think is not a supplemental thing, but actually is like a very important, primary duty for us as socialists. If we want to undo the social relations of capital, then we have to relate to each other differently. And one of those ways of relating is to really build true trust, true solidarity, and a true community and a relation with each other that is not preformed by the communities and relations that we have with each other already through capital, like as white people, as Black people, as these classes that are structured by our labor and what we produce. So I think first people got to learn how to talk to each other and have discussion, not debate. I think those are different things, but also discussion. And then we have to attempt to do that with Black people, which people just don't do. Because they're well, maybe we'll do it if I can go and knock on a Black person's door and ask them to support XYZ petition, maybe. Or candidate, maybe, get them to sign a thing. That would be a good opportunity to talk to a Black person. I don't think that is a good, it is an opportunity to talk to Black people, but I think we have to create opportunities to talk to each other beyond just the relation of what do I want from this person, be like, I need your solidarity right now, vote, I need your solidarity right now, sign on to pledge, XYZ. But also just merely building this in, also what do they need? And also what do they think? Not pre-configuring what these relationships might look like could be a start, coming from a openness of I don't know what this space was going to produce for me, question-wise, relation-wise, and I still don't. What it could produce for me could be some new comrades who might have interesting things and might want to connect on stuff and blah, blah, blah. And I think we have to create that openness in our relationships with like, as we're trying to build with like Black people, Black communities, which we just do not do for the most part, I see. And part of this, I think, is we're dangerously hovering. I said a lot of bad things. I said a bad thing about NGOs. I feel like we're hovering around that. This like desire to like professionalize, desire to interact in a way of like constituents and clients, like this big working class that we petition sometimes to help us with something. And then we work on their behalf versus what I think would be more useful to building, especially in communities where we don't have strong ties, like Black people, Black communities, with a sort of more open humbleness of just like, let's start a relationship. Yeah.
Anyone in person have a question? Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for speaking. It's been really interesting. And I agree with what you're saying.
Thank you. I validate it.
Yeah, something you mentioned was that academia has a disciplining effect. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Academia has a disciplining effect on the underclass alongside like NGOs. I was wondering if you could just go into that a little bit more about like what that means, like to have like a disciplining, is it just like the professionalization that you were just talking about, or?
You guys were out or you were watching or whatever last summer, and everyone's like outside, right? They're all like, I don't know, okay, some cars burned, okay, a precinct burned down, okay, it's not that big a deal. Like, those are small potatoes, those are exciting things, but like, everyone acts like the sky's falling down. So you have all of these people, these who are professional, you know, like civilized change makers to come out to say, here's what you should be doing. You should be voting. It's just really unfortunate that I feel summer 2020 was like 2020 and not 2021 when we weren't in an election year, because I feel like that general election was a real thing that, yeah, this class of NGO academic type people came around to say like, when I say discipline, maybe it's better to call it like civilizing forces, these like institutions, to say like, here's how you do civilized change. Here it has civility. We're going to return to like being good, normal, upstanding citizens. You know, our goal is to be good citizens. So essentially, you know, how do you do that? And yes, we want change, but in the right way. So I think those are essentially the purposes of that, of the stuff that those places produce. Yeah, don't light shit on fire, y'all. Like the NGOs, we're working on some solution. We're doing some workshops, and we think you should vote and you should become a member. You know, there's so many of these NGOs where being a member is like you're just on a fucking listserv. You're not doing anything. You don't get any sort of chance to say anything or decide on taking collective action. Yeah. So these things are, I think, disciplining that way, and they're also literally for the people who enter them. And people who enter them are sometimes entering these spaces in really good faith. They're trying. They want to have a thought. They're like, I'd like to do something, and they're getting in there, and it's like a fucking brain drain for like the people we need to be helping build the revolution. Like, it sucks all the time and energy. Have you ever met someone who, I mean, maybe you work at an NGO, you know, and they're all like, it's never gonna get fixed. They're all like black-pilled, they're all depressed as fuck. It's horrible. There's like, nothing's gonna happen. And they're right, nothing's gonna happen there, but that's the purpose, you know, both. It's a place to put all of that energy that arises naturally when there's, I think, these inequities, these tensions, these clearly something's wrong here. You need to do something with that. Capital can't just let that foment. That's fucking like revolutionary energy right there. Can't let too many of those people get in the room together. So, you know, you got some of them go to NGOs and academics, that's one way. You have the ones who get convinced like you could also be part of the elite class. the black capitalists, and Jay-Z's like over here convincing whole generation, like 4X, you guys can be a 4X like entrepreneur, whatever. And then there's like, that don't work, prison, police, and you know, you can be warehoused. But you can't just let that sort of energy be around. Yeah.
Got a Zoom question. Andrew, go ahead.
Thank you. Before I ask Cheryl the question, you are doing a great job typing and at the same time hearing and being able to type the same messages there. So I wanted to tell her that because she is doing a great job at versatility right now. You can hear me, by the way?
We can hear you.
All right, perfect. So I just wanted to ask real quick how you feel about in terms of with W.E.B. Du Bois, do you feel that he should get even more level of talk in regards to Karl Marx in terms of being able to have less of a centering of whiteness and more, I say, reach out to Black people who would be very much vested in being in democratic socialist circles and who have been turned off through capitalism and just the American system of systematic, racism towards Black people. And do you feel that it's something where it's important that when we have any level of criticism towards Black centrists or Black conservatives, whether it be from Obama to, a fool like Candace Owens and everything, that it's important for white leftists to make sure that they continue to just critique on the grounds of capitalism and socialism and not like stare into that whole perspective of, are they being sellouts and being to the point of not being like Black enough per se. So that's just my question with that.
Yeah, I think white leftists should probably just, you don't know who you're gonna run up on, could be me. You should just probably not like critique Black people. They're afraid of not being Black enough. Just probably don't do that at all. But I think your question of like W.E.B. Du Bois, like, yeah, I couldn't believe, I was gonna read this book, and I couldn't believe how expensive, the books were. W.E.B. Du Bois, like trying to buy his books online, very expensive, not very accessible. And I do think that shows that there's not a lot of engagement, as much engagement as he deserves. Although I did see there was a whole event series. I saw Mary McCago like did a little workshop, W.E.B. Du Bois recently. So I think that's like changing. But I think overall, like we should be reading broadly. None of these people are my daddies. Like these are not my, I'm not related to them. These are just people who should be helping us sharpen our fucking stick, our sword, I don't know, like stick. And so we should be reading broadly, and we should absolutely be reading W.E.B. Du Bois, Cedric Robinson, Robert D.G. Kelly, et cetera, Angela Davis. We need to be reading people, non-white people, because they're gonna have interesting perspectives. But we also just need in general to be reading more broadly. But I would say I came into DSA through a radical Black feminist reading group. That's how I came, like as a Black person. I was like, I like to hear about Black feminists. That's interesting. Like I'm Black, this appeals to me. So I would say, obviously, I do think, and there was a bunch of Black people there, that one way maybe to also draw Black people into this group or, any non-white people is to start creating these sorts of like spaces to discuss work that would, be by Black authors, be by non-white authors. Could also, appeal to people who might feel Marx is just this white dude. I'm not saying Marx is just this white, he is just this white dude. I don't know, he has some good ideas. We like him.
Yep, that's it. Appreciate it.
Or did someone else raise their hand? Yeah.
Do I hear you now?
It's a little hard.
Well, thank you for the talk. This Friday is Black Friday, so so that means that we're going to claim Black Fridays matter. Actually, I claim Black Fridays matter. So I want to talk about I want to ask about Black lives. Like over the weekend, we celebrated trans the trans the remembering that what we lost. So my question and so my question is, have you heard? So my question is, do you heard about Wither House? Have you heard about this?
Yeah, have I heard about Rittenhouse and like what happened over the weekend? The defund NYPD campaign, which I'm a part of, did a whole call to action. Moved very quickly. Steering put out this call, we were all gonna meet together at Barclays for this rally because of the Rittenhouse verdict. And I think I think there is a real opportunity for socialists to make an intervention in these sorts of spaces. So one reason to show up is also just solidarity with Kenosha, but another reason to show up at the Rittenhouse verdict rally, Taking Black Lives Matter rally is I do think we can make useful interventions. So we showed up and there's people who are this is a travesty of justice and he should be in jail. And I'm an abolitionist and I was I don't think so. I'm not invested in him going to jail. Instead, this would be a great opportunity to talk about why this whole system has no ability to bring justice. Here's a lesson from the verdict, the trial. It's just that there was never any actually real opportunity to actually have justice invoked through this criminal legal system. Because the United States does not have a criminal legal system that can actually invoke or do justice. So to be able to be there to make that sort of intervention, I think is important. Also to be there to say what is the actual what is Kyle Rittenhouse, what does that have to say about the world? Which I think what it has to say is that very clearly certain types of whiteness and white behaviors are allowable and certain types are not. So you are now seeing that whiteness, if you are a white class traitor, like the two people that Kyle Rittenhouse killed, you are not worthy of the protection of the capital state. That's not. So you really get to see, I think that's the kind of thing that we need to be on the scenes of stuff like the trial to talk about with people. Because instead you have also people, there's someone out there who was this is a travesty of justice, we see all this stuff that's happening to us and the whole media is lying to us. That's why we shouldn't be vaxxed. I don't know, just things took a hard left. Which I don't want to make fun of these people too hard, that you'll see at various, rallies, not just Black Lives Matter rallies, any rally, but just that those people are aware something is fucking wrong. They're feeling that feeling, something is not correct. I'm not sure that I agree with their analysis. I don't agree. I don't think any of us do, most of us. And so instead, our job, I think, as socialists is to be there to try to just engage in discussion so there could be a different analysis. Why are we pissed off about the Rittenhouse thing? Not because I want to go to jail, mainly because this entire debacle shows something about the race relations, the labor relations, power relations of the United States.
We have Ian on I think we have time for like maybe one or two more questions. Is that okay with you? Okay, so Ian, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I also just want to echo the gratitude. I think you're doing great talking to a room full of people. It would terrify me.
Thanks, Ian.
Yeah. I have two quick things I just wanted to touch on. The comrade who brought up your comments on civilizing and disciplining through academia and other institutions, I think it's really interesting, even through the idea of NGOs and charities, because I think that they're really integral to reinforcing the constructs of this white racial capitalism and how they negate the legitimacy of people's own experiences and confine it to this hierarchical structure of expertise. And people no longer feel empowered to speak to their own experiences. They sort of have to go through these institutions, and you can only speak on the matter if you have a degree in the matter, et cetera. So I think that was really interesting. The other thing that I just want to sort of pick your brain on, because I think I know where you stand on this, but I just want to be able to hear you sort of speak it out to the room and hear more about it, is do you think electoral organizing as like the fundamental strategy for an organization like DSA is a legitimate pathway towards a socialist future, given that it is our current electoral system itself is so rooted and entrenched in this white racial capitalist construct that doesn't really engage with the people in a meaningful way? Can you just speak to your ideas on that and as how we maybe could create a broader coalition of multiracial solidarity?
Ian's like, let's expose her.
No, not at all, not at all. Oh my God.
Kidding, Ian.
All right.
Ian's in the DeFi campaign. So he's heard me say this before, which is just that I don't think, I'll come out and say, I don't think we're gonna vote our way to socialism. I don't think that at all. That's not gonna happen. For the same reasons you can't get justice from the US criminal justice system. Because it's not set up for that at all. You think we're gonna be able to snake to eat itself? No. I think though, so I don't think electoral organizers is going to do that, it's going to make the socialist world. I really don't think that. I know there are people who do think that, and good for them. One way or another, one of us is going to be right, and hopefully, whatever. Outcomes there, but I don't think it, because I think these things are structurally unable to do that. I would not say that I always think you shouldn't do anything electoral though. Maybe because I see a lot of the stuff that we do right now as, I always say, we are practicing, we are engaging in practice, we are developing skills, we're sharpening the fucking stick so we can stab the snake, because we can't trick him into eating himself. So eventually we are gonna stab him. But we first have to practice a little bit, because you gotta move as a body, you gotta do some stuff. And I don't believe in voting as harm reduction, but I do see one of the modes that people understand of doing politics is obviously electoral. It's a very easy thing to, it exists outside of just us, it's there. And so it's relatively, I guess, easy to put together, understand even the shape of something like a canvas for an electoral candidate, and that sort of work. And it helps sometimes us, I think it can help us practice doing sort of work together. I do also think on the level of city council elections, meeting sometimes to get the defund is a campaign that is ultimately really a budget fight. I also have thoughts about defund as a campaign that is sort of a Trojan horse of getting abolitionist politics embedded in people's minds across the city. But insofar as it is a budget fight, there is a need to control city council, right? And to get people on our side. So it can be useful. I just don't think it's gonna build the socialist world. We are gonna do some practice through it though. But I think that there can be a danger of like getting too like focused and doing just this like mode of work, which I was talking with a friend earlier about voting as like a very alienated way of participating in politics. Like our current like voting system, the way people participate in it and understand themselves to be like a voter as like an individual option. It's even such a trite joke now, like my vote doesn't count or whatever. Like that people feel this disempowerment and then are encouraged to continue to participate in this disempowering process is, I think, something we should be aware of and be wary of as socialists, of like funneling people into just like things where we canvass for our electoral campaign, for our candidates, and then like we encourage people to vote, come out as block, and that is the big socialist victory. Because I think our job is also to figure out how to do collective action in other ways together. Those have to be present in addition to the voting action, which is very individual, me casting my one vote. And we talked about this, like, why is this different from like we vote in DSA all the time. Like, do we just hate voting as a thing? But we vote and we also have critical community and discussion. Not as much as we should, but it does exist, right? Like that is the thing that takes this from being an atomized like action that just doesn't really connect to any other collective action and brings it into an action that can be socialist. You know, I'm democratic, only a little bit of like, you know, the love of a benign dictatorship one day, but you know, like I love voting. But we do discuss, and I think so when we do electoral organizing, insofar as we also don't set up those sorts of community like conversations, like go ahead, do the canvassing, whatever. Also, you need to be creating those spaces for truly building relationships, not just knocking on someone's door, like, but actually building a relationship, not only between us and them, but also between those people together and us helping to try to facilitate that. So any sort of organizing that helps facilitate building our connection with this person, their connection with their neighbor, I think those are kind of like organizing actions that I'm more interested in, beyond just the strict, like, let's organize some door knocking for this candidate. Yeah.
I think we're up on time. So thank you again, Cheryl, everyone. Yay. We have some announcements. I will go ahead and just position myself so I can post the links to Zoom people. Thanks for hanging in there, Zoom people, and please stay for us to give you some cool information about how to plug in.
Should I read the announcements?
Mhm.
Okay, hi, everybody. My name's Carrington. Cheryl, thank you so much. It was just a really great discussion. Thank you for coming to North Brooklyn Night School. As Mia said, we meet every other Tuesday.